Yay, okay. So hopefully you can now see this as a full screen. Yay, amazing. Okay. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to present, host, activate all of the things this masterclass today, which is all around the topic of becoming an embodied wealthy woman. Because for me, there's a lot of women making money in the online space and there's a lot of women that aren't, but ultimately it's this being an embodiment of wealth that ultimately truly makes you wealthy, because it comes in all areas of life, not just financially in your bank account. um, Hi Rita, I'm just launching into the training now, but thank you so much for being here. If you have any comments as we're moving throughout, just let me know. I'm going to make sure that there is more than enough time to come back to all of that later. But I've actually gone with slides. So normally in my trainings, it's just me kind of in flow talking about the things, but one thing I think that there is a serious lack of when it comes to transforming your relationship with money is a lack of depth in free trainings. It's just like, oh, did your parents say that money doesn't grow on trees? And that's that. The reality is your relationship with money is symbolic of your relationship with yourself. And that is deeper than just like one level for me. So I really wanted to make sure that you had all of the information today, and equally that this is a training with a lot of value and that is going to create shifts and plant seeds of awareness now, but also be the gift that keeps on giving, because when we know better, we do better. And if I kind of give you, a lot of information now that you can start to connect the dots on for yourself, then obviously, that is just going to continue to expand, evolve, and flourish like forevermore. And that's ultimately what it's all about for me, is giving women all of the information that they need to become an empowered and embodied wealthy woman, so that they aren't living their lives, through a lens that isn't serving them, so they aren't just scraping the potential of what is available to them, so that their trauma isn't becoming their whole identity and limiting them, because ultimately, as I'll go into, the world needs us to be wealthy women right now. So welcome to my masterclass. Tech is not my friend, so I'm going to, bear with me if the slides don't quite work, but you'll obviously get the intention, as I said. So hopefully you are here today. If you recognize for yourself that you are doing all the right things in business, but you're still never really kind of getting to those numbers, the numbers that everybody loves to shout about on socials, and they make it look so effortless and, in their pants, doing nothing, sitting on a beach, and I've made a shed ton of money. And the thing is, it might not even just be about the money for you. For me, that wasn't the hook to become a business coach. I was a business owner before I was a business coach, and I didn't even know it was a thing. But obviously, as empowered women, we're not silly. We know that there is an opportunity to have both, and we refuse to keep choosing that we have to be a good person who's kind of permanent servitude, or we get to be a wealthy woman. We get to do both, right? So you might recognize for yourself that what I have to share is valuable, but for some reason it's just not, the sales aren't selling as they should be. Or maybe you've made money, and I definitely know, depending on when you started your business, it was a lot easier a few years ago to hit 10K months and all the things, but for some reason, like, you're not getting that momentum that continues to build. It's like the feast and famine cycles. Or maybe you've got it, but you feel like it's going to go, so you can't really enjoy it. Puts you very much in your toxic masculine state where you're hustling. And maybe you're tired of that and you're ready to actually think, do you know what? I've done my time kind of growing my business, getting myself out there, doing all the things. I just want to have more ease, create from wholeness, alignment, not have to feel that pressure all the time. Because here's the thing, whatever is keeping you stuck from whatever it is that you want right now, it isn't a lack of strategy or information. We are living in a time of information. If anything, it's overwhelming, the amount of strategies and options available to us. And part of that becoming a wealthy woman is starting to learn that discernment for yourself as to what makes sense, what resonates and what doesn't. And typically it's our emotional capacity to receive more that is actually keeping us stuck, more than a lack of information or opportunities. And what I would love to say is I'm going to give you a lot of information, like I said today, so that you have all of the information and you can start to discern for yourself what resonates and what doesn't. So I would strongly encourage you to leave things if they don't feel aligned. Obviously, I'm super spiritual, so I might, go into more spiritual concepts. But if that doesn't resonate with you, understand equally that I am a Gemini. So I am exactly two halves of the coin. I am highly strategic, masculine, logical. I'm a hypnotherapist by trade. I work with NLP. And deep subconscious programming. So it took a minute for me to get to the spiritual concepts. I started very much in the logical first, and then I started to bridge the gap between energy and human design and manifestation and all of those things. So everything that I'm teaching you is what I know to be true, what I can understand and relate back to subconscious programming. It's not, you know, I'm still very accessible in terms of my spiritual journey. I've got friends that are completely the other end of the spectrum, talking about adding out of body experiences, spirit guides, and all the things. And I absolutely love that, but I'm not there yet. So this is very much rooted in science, in proven technologies and techniques and strategies and methodologies that I've embodied for myself and with my clients also. So here's the thing, and why I feel it's so important for me to do this right now. It's because the world feels like it's gone to shit, right? Everything feels very heavy. For a lot of us, 2025 has not been the year that we thought it was going to be at the beginning of the year. There's been a lot of collective shifts that have needed to happen, a lot of business models that needed to be outgrown, strategies that needed to kind of not work, so that we were all encouraged to dig deeper, to become more aligned, and essentially, build that inner resilience, creativity, all of the things that we need as entrepreneurs, seasoned entrepreneurs that are going to be here for a very long time, right? But equally, the way that we change that, the cost of living, the economy, even crime in the streets, is by empowering ourselves as women, by becoming financially independent and empowered, by healing our trauma, so that our shit doesn't become anybody else's shit, so that when we make more money, when we're able to pay it forwards, as women, we're more likely to invest in better causes that impact everybody. And it's why we would also add 250 billion to the UK economy alone if we scaled at the same rate as men. And all of that, the contribution that we can bring, not only to ourselves, to our families, and to our communities, the inspiration that we can provide by being happy, healed, empowered, financially well-resourced women, what that can do for everybody else around us, but also to the economy and our country. Like, the world genuinely needs us to become wealthy women. That's how we create change. That's, I'm done with the patriarchy and the old ways of working. Like, it's crumbling for a reason. But the reality is, it's harder for us to make money, and it's harder for us to keep hold of it for all of these reasons listed. So our brains are wired to be more risk averse than men. It's why we don't typically, we're really only just coming into, I've been in business for over 11 years. I built my portfolio in brick and mortar businesses and then transitioned online. And the amount of women that I encountered, 10 years ago was hardly anything. They were artists, they were creatives, they were healers, but they weren't earning money because it just, social media wasn't really even a thing for monetization back then. Obviously, that's changed. But even with that permission and that evidence that what we want is safe for us to receive, our brains are still more risk averse than men's. It's meant to be. We are meant to stay within our tribes. Our brains haven't evolved that much since caveman days. So men are meant to wander. They're meant to be the gatherers, to go out and find, food and all the things. Women are meant to stay close to the tribe. We're meant to look after our young, and inherently, that will still be, having an impact on our mode of operation, our thought process, and our way of being even now. So it means that if we don't know, or we don't really feel intuitively, or we're worried that we can't be successful, we take ourselves out of the game before we even get started. Societal conditioning obviously holds us back because we are all designed to be good girls. We are all conditioned from a very young age to be liked by others because that represents our safety. It means that, you know, we will be accepted by our tribe and have that safety in numbers. And what I would say is, as I'm going through this, is start to allow your mind to really receive what it is that I'm sharing and start to connect the dots for yourself. Like I say, take what resonates and what doesn't, leave it, but allow it to just, you know, absorb in your psyche, because there are so many layers to your money mindset. The first things will be the obvious, you know, experiences and trauma when you're young, but once you've overcome those initial kind of, you know, elephants in the room and obvious things, it's so much more nuanced and layered than that. So really allow yourself to receive, especially if you've done some work on your money mindset already. You might be like, oh yeah, I know this, but there will always be a new level. As I mentioned earlier on our voice note earlier, you know, your current identity is only wired to allow you to receive the amount of success that you have right now. And if that is not what you want, and I'm assuming that you know intuitively that there's more, that's why you're here, then there needs to be a new identity emerging. And that is only going to come from unlearning, creating radical self-awareness, and all of the things that I'll be sharing with you. So societal conditioning, obviously, as I said, holds us back. Is why my best-selling book is called The Good Girl's Guide to Money Making, because we are all rewarded for being and validated for being good girls while we're young. I have to be so conscious now. Obviously, I'm a mum of 6 and I've got 4 girls. Like the language that I use with my daughters, you know, it's giving them positive self-esteem, but not rewarding them for things that aren't actually going to serve them when they're older. But also on the flip side of that, there is very real governmental bias around investing in women, because and only 1% of venture capital ever goes to female-led businesses. I do believe that will change, but at a very slow rate. For me, when I wanted to purchase my first business, I had to sell my house. I'd been on the property ladder since I was 18 years old, and nobody would invest in me. I had nearly £200,000 of equity in my home. And even with that financial backing, nobody was going to lend me money. So I had to sell my house. But equally, I didn't even think about really going all in and asking to borrow money, because I'd always been told that, you know, borrowing money was bad and debt was bad. So I'd avoided it like the plague. And actually, it massively stunted my growth when I was in property, and also when it came to having my business. There's a huge lack of financial education for women specifically, and environments that give us success. So I don't know about you, but my mum was not a trailblazer. She worked at the co-op. Bless her. She was in survival her whole life, as were we, which I'll share with you in a little bit. But you know, she wasn't out there showing me what was possible as a woman. She was telling me unconsciously, God rest her soul, everything that I didn't want from life. You know, that was my example. So we don't have, you know, typically entrepreneurial role models, especially at this generation. Like I'm in my 40s. We are the ones that are truly the trailblazers. So whatever you take away from today, please know that you are an absolute rock star, because we are the women that do not have the evidence that what we want is safe, but we are creating it for ourselves, because we know intuitively that there is more out there for us, not only for us, but for our kids and for the generations that come behind us. We will also have ancestral wounds. So we know through the study of epigenetics that traumas are passed down through our DNA. Again, part of that survival mechanism that's inbuilt from us from our caveman days. You know, this is how I've just recently had a baby. I can't keep saying she's newborn. She's not. She's nearly 10 months. But from the moment that she was born, she already knew to jump when there was a loud noise. She already knew to be scared of being dropped. And that's where the baby startle reflex comes out, where they'll throw their arms out. Nobody taught her that. She had that from like a second born. And equally, a baby can get its way to like breast milk without even being able to hold up its head, because all of this is passed down through us to ensure that, you know, we can hit the ground running as human beings and ensure the survival of the species. Obviously, some statistics that I posted yesterday that really pissed me off is that 10% of female-led businesses will never get to 6 figures. And actually, we know you need to be at least 6 figures to really have a meaningful business. You know, 10K months seems to be the holy grail, but actually the reality is after VAT and taxes and expenses, it's not very much money anymore. It really isn't. So we are not set up in so many different ways, but also we're not even aspiring to have more than we need. And only 2% of female-led businesses will ever get to seven figures, which to me isn't about how much you want for yourself. It's also about how much impact we can make. I love the fact that I can employ other women who then get to be at home with their babies and get to work flexibly and don't have to put up with shit in corporate like I used to. That for me feels really empowering, is to be a job provider as well as, I'm making money and I'm living life my way. I'm always looking for ways to pay it back. We also have the highest startup and close rate, and I think it is that because we're doing it too much by ourselves. It's not sustainable. We aren't recruiting people with expertise. We're trying to wear all the hats, do all the things. I'm a social media expert. I'm a content creator. I'm an accountant. I'm also mastering my craft in delivery for my clients. Like, you can't be all the things in a business and expect it to thrive as a business. You can certainly educate and empower yourself, but at some point you have to treat it like a business and start to invest in teams, resources, mentors, tech, adverts, like all of these things that actually make it, a fully sustainable, self-funded business. And obviously only 1 in 5 of us are actually doing that. Women in the UK are twice as likely to live in poverty as men, and that makes me really sad because I think it is testament to our feminine energy and our resourcefulness as women to make do and to put up with and to accept less than, and to just, I know I've been through many seasons of life. I could make £10 last for a week if I needed it to, because we are resourceful and because we are creative and determined, and because we are trained from the moment that we were born and before it to put everybody else's needs above us. But that's really fucking sad, because actually, not just for ourselves, but like I say, our kids and our siblings and our partners and our communities are looking for us to show them what's possible, and that doesn't come from living in poverty. So we are equally still, carrying 70%, 75% of the mental load in domestic chores at home, as well as trying to be trailblazers, as well as trying to do all of the things. And, even more so, I'm a single parent with 6 kids. So I'm 150% of those things. Although saying that my kids are empowered, they do help. But we also have more to lose, or more perceived loss, when we leave things like the benefit safety, the perceived safety of the benefit system in corporate jobs, maternity pay, and all of the things. So, if you are feeling exhausted by that list, hopefully this should give you some validation that you are not doing it wrong. You just haven't been set up to win yet. There's always a yet, not a but. And like I say, when women have economic power, we do good things with it. Because here's the thing, you don't have a strategy problem right now. You are a very capable, intelligent woman who knows how to be of service, because ultimately that's what we are doing in our businesses as entrepreneurs. You've been doing it your whole goddamn life. What you do have, however, is a nervous system problem. You've got a worthiness problem and an embodiment gap. So your subconscious brain right now is not letting you hold on to more money because your identity doesn't match the woman that you believe that you need to become in order to hold it and receive it and be worthy of it. Your income cannot grow beyond your self-concept. And that is fact. This is why strategy alone will never be enough for us as women. But where does that self-imposed limit come from? So let me know in the comments if you did the guided meditation that I popped into the Telegram group yesterday. What came up for you around what numbers feel safe right now? Because at the moment, you have that self-imposed limitation, that glass ceiling. We don't need everybody else to limit us in what we can receive. We're already doing it ourselves. And I'm always curious what that looks like for each of us. But it isn't random. It hasn't been set by somebody outside of yourself, because here's the thing, universal truths. Money doesn't care about you. It doesn't have an ego. It doesn't have, a moral compass or code. It will go wherever it feels, welcome. It will go to the person that gives it the least resistance. And a lot of the time, that's not going to the people that are worthy of it. Reality is, I put a post the other day about why narcissists are so well off. And it's typically because they have such a strong sense of self-belief. I know lots of broken women who are narcissistic, who are absolutely killing it in the coaching space right now. Not because they are better, not because they are more committed to mastery and therefore more deserving or worthy. They just fucking love themselves more. And that is the reality. Your net worth is a direct relation of your self-worth. Hi Bex, just coming in. We're just kind of getting into flow, but feel free to leave any comments and I'm going to come back to you guys at the end. But I just want you at the moment to be here receiving. And as I said earlier, take what you need, what resonates, what sparks something in you and leave what doesn't. Everything's going to be available to you to come back to, because I truly believe like it will be the gift that keeps on giving with this training, because I haven't held back. We don't gatekeep. I'm not saving the best stuff for my paid programs. I want you guys to be wealthy, and it doesn't serve me or my soul's purpose or my mission for me to hold back in any way, because the more I empower you guys, the more you can invest in me. For me, I don't understand mentors that do it in the reverse. But as I said, your upper limit is not random. It's determined by by three factors, I believe. Your trauma that you experienced when you were young, which will be relative, because trauma is relative. Not every trauma is, big T trauma and incredible, like crazy events such as mine, which I'll share with you. My kids will still have their own version of trauma, because it's based on your lens of the world and your perception and your experiences. So the other day, my daughter, who's a teenager, cried for an hour because I wouldn't purchase her £1,000 Sephora cart. If you've got teenage girls, let me know. But to her, that was, being denied, being like experiencing guilt and shame around her desires. Like, it's so unjust. And I'm like, girl, I was like homeless at your age. But even so, I'm not going to invalidate her trauma, because to her it is. And that's fine. We're here to kind of, we've all got our soul's contract and what we're here to kind of grow and expand through. Hers will be a Sephora cart. I was like, it's fine. I'll empower you to pay for your therapy when you're older. So it's based on your trauma, your childhood conditioning, which will be, your experiences also, and your relationship to safety, support and power, which I'm also going to be touching on. And it will be, there's lots of different layers that this will relate to you. I'll share in a sec. But the reality is, you don't need to push harder. You don't need to do more. You just need to feel safer holding on to more. And that, because money is just a symbol right now. It's a very physical, tangible reflection of your internal reality. That's all it is. I love to talk about money because, as I said, as much as I'm very much in my feminine and I'm spiritual and I'm intuitively led and I'm a female leader, I'm also very logical. I've got ADHD. I love the quick wins, the dopamine hits, the tangible outcomes that I can see. And money is a reflection of that. So right now, this is why I have a wealthy woman framework. So even within this, there are different layers to how that internal reality is presenting itself to you. It's why you need to work with your mindset. Obviously, we have to rewire our subconscious programming, and I use lots of different modalities for this. Absolutely. People talk about mindset a lot when it comes to transforming your relationship with money, because that is underpinning absolutely everything that you do, which I'll share. But it's also about regulating your nervous system. And this is the piece that is also missing a lot from money mindset. People are expecting you to just, think logically when it comes to money. But if you've experienced a trauma, your body will not want you to go through that again. And as I said, trauma is relative. So this could be judgment, abandonment, embarrassment. Like that very visceral response that you've had in that moment has been stored somewhere in your body as a way of stopping you from doing that thing again. We don't want to experience that again. So every time the thought of that comes up, or something that seems to be similar, we're going to start to go through those motions as a survival mechanism. And then equally for me, you also get the benefits of living in a time where, we can do anything we want to do. We might as well have a spiritual connection to that work also. So I believe, there's thousands of ways that you can make money right now. It might as well be one that really, fills up your cup in terms of your soul's purpose, and your, this is where human design comes in for me. I help my clients to align their business goals and their strategy with their human design and their soul's contract. Because we might as well, right? Do all the things that we're fully meant to do while we're here having this human experience. Because if you don't do these things, what happens is your body will and your brain will essentially create self-saboteur archetypes. So again, I could be here all day talking about all these things. I want to try and keep it top level, but just kind of ways of being that will in some way be protecting you from going through and re-experiencing things from the past that weren't of your highest good. It will keep you it will ensure that you are playing small because you won't want to experience those things again, undercharging because you'll want to be accepted and liked by your tribe, or if you genuinely are just not used to holding on to these new amounts of money coming into your business, it will just dissipate. Something will come up. The universe will want to get you back on track. Your body will want you to get back to a state of homeostasis, which is where you are used to things. So even, there's a lot of judgment on women that are in narcissistic and abusive relationships. If you haven't experienced that, like, why do they stay with them? And it's like, because it's better the devil you know. We are, used to being in chaos. We actually find ways to thrive in chaos because our brain will always keep us moving forwards. So if that is your kind of default and go-to mode of operation, you will want to get back to that at all times because it's familiar. Not because it's good for you, not because it's ultimately, tying into your happiness and your ultimate fulfillment on this planet, but because it's familiar. So then we end up leaving money on the table. Okay. Then we end up just kind of going through these unhelpful patterns of behaviors. So, oh, 1 second, ladies. Tell me if you can hear any of that background chaos in my house right now. Apologies if you can. I homeschool 2 of my children also. I've got one that's sick and a baby. So, okay. So what I want to share with you is why, again, I feel this strong connection to this work. It's because I've lived it and it's part of my soul's contract to do that. I'm a manifesting generator. We are here to live many life paths, to go through lots of different things, experience lots of new cycles so that we can really be that embodiment of growth and learning and then pay it forwards to others. Like even in my human design and my gene keys, it says one of my unique gifts is to be a manager of resources. I'm here to show women how to manage their resources. It makes me die because then it applies so much meaning to the trauma that I've experienced growing up. So again, maybe there's something in your trauma that means that you are perfectly positioned to be the exact right person for your ideal client right now. I won't necessarily be going into all of that in this training, but I just want to kind of show why this isn't just, oh, I thought I'd talk about money mindset because it might make me some money. It's genuinely always been part of who I am. So essentially, when I was 4, we were a naval family. My dad was in the Navy. He passed while he was abroad. And obviously, once you are no longer in the Navy, you can't live on the naval bases. So we very unceremoniously, at a young age, were homeless. My mum was obviously like in her mid-20s, so she hadn't anticipated that any of this was going to happen. She didn't have a plan B or anybody around her that could support us in that situation, and we ended up homeless. Equally, she did receive some money that was crowdfunded from the guys on my dad's naval ship, which was lovely, because he didn't have life insurance or any of those things. And she received some money, but because of the way that it had come to her and because it was so foreign to what she had experienced growing up, she sabotaged it. So again, by the age of 12, we were evicted again. We lost our home, and I was sent to live with different sides of the family. And that was kind of my journey. But from 12 onwards, I didn't really have like a stable family home. One side of my family was considered to be wealthy, and one side weren't. Essentially, we lived on like the roughest council estates in Portsmouth. It was so fascinating to me, and I didn't necessarily realize the profoundness of what I had experienced until I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. Let me know if you've read that book by Robert Kiyosaki. Yes. Okay. Oh, 1 second, ladies. I'm so sorry. We've got a food delivery and they need to see my face. Sorry, I think they thought they were home alone. Um, so yeah, I read that book and then I was like, wow, interesting. This adds a whole nother layer to my money mindset journey, because it wasn't just, oh, we didn't have anything growing up, because the reality was at times we did, and we were very abundant. But this is why 75% of lottery winners lose their money within the first 3 years, because even if you make more money in your business, you're not going to be able to hold on to that money if you haven't done this work. And that's what happened to me, obviously, when I then became an entrepreneur. So basically, I lived with two different sides of the family. One were very wealthy, and because I wasn't their child, I was able to create, as a bit of a survival mechanism, a sense of detachment from what was going on, like a gentle observer. And I think that's what makes me such a great coach, because I had that curiosity and that detachment from such a young age. I could almost see why one side of the family was wealthy. It's because there was a lot of trust between them and money. They didn't talk about it badly. They didn't try and hide it. They were happy to pay taxes. They were happy to invest in property. They weren't hustling like the other side of the family, that were always like quick wins, fast cash, don't tell anyone about it, don't pay tax. Like, it was like, well, no wonder, because you've got such a toxic relationship with money. um so then obviously, the first thing I wanted to do at age 16 was get the hell out of there and buy my own house, because that represented safety to me at the time. And I bought my first property at 18, with through lots of grit, determination. And that was always my go-to mode up until when I had kids, was to basically outwork everybody. I had 3 jobs at 16. I was already working full time by the time I did my GCSEs. But again, because I hadn't done the work around feeling worthy of the success that I created, and I was worried about leaving everybody behind, and all of this kind of internal dialogue that was undermining my success, I built that portfolio very intuitively. Not, YouTube wasn't a thing. The only thing I had was a little book by Sarah Beanie. If anybody watches Property Ladder, she was my only role model in life, because everybody else just didn't understand my determination or my work ethic. My friends were on the piss every weekend, and I was working 3 jobs. But because I hadn't done that work, when that relationship ended at 25, I literally, in order to get a clean break, because it was my decision and it wasn't his, I gave him 90% of my portfolio. That guy literally became a self-made millionaire off my trauma. And what I realized when I started doing this work, there's a lot of people in life who have profited from my trauma, because how you do one thing in life is how you do everything. And as I've said, what you are willing to receive in money is reflective of what you are willing to receive in all areas of life. When it comes to love, friendship, visibility, support, impact, it's no surprise to me, wealthy women have power teams and childminders and cooks and cleaners and all of these things. It's because they know, like, they're worthy of being supported. They don't get validated from being busy and doing all the things and being a martyr. They are just here for whatever they need. So for me, I thought I'd overcome all of my demons. Obviously, became a business owner, but I've never really questioned it, to be honest, because I was like, well, I'll just work harder, work more, make more money. And I thought I was successful. Then I obviously became a business owner, and that was quite confronting, because I'd put all of my validation into different rungs that I could hit in my corporate career, getting my masters and doing all of these things, getting the house, getting the car, having a savings account. I thought I was doing well because I had premium bonds. Look at me being so responsible. But actually, when I became a business owner, I didn't realize that I was still following that same patterns of self-sabotage, over investing in my business, spending my money like I stole it, trying to buy essentially love and loyalty from my staff by paying them more than I needed to. And it wasn't until I had a 3-day audit from HMRC. So my brick and mortar business was a barbershop. That was the first one that I built, and it's 100% cash business. So obviously raised some red flags. They came in and audited me, and my accountant afterwards was like, are you okay? Like, you are literally sabotaging all of the success that you have created and spending your money like you stole it. And for me, like, I often think of him, he's still my accountant now. I was like, that is the first time in my life that anybody has ever actually given a shit to ask me if I'm okay, because when it comes to money, because when I left that relationship, nobody was telling me not to. Nobody was saying like, come on, girl, you've done all the work. You need to claim like half your wealth in that portfolio. Everybody was like, yeah, he's really sad. Like, you know, everybody was more concerned about me being a good person and doing the right thing by him than myself. Nobody, because nobody recognized me as a wealthy woman, because my family felt like I was leaving them behind. They felt betrayed by my success. But equally, they were profiting on that. You know, and whether it was unconsciously or not, you know, if I, by me being successful, it was holding up a mirror to some of the members of my family who weren't successful, who wanted to stay in victim mode and believe that the success that I created wasn't available to them too. So to the friends that I was paying for on nights out, to the you know, the staff members that were getting way above industry average. You know, I was paying £700 a month on coffee. There was, you know, to the mentors that were taking my money and laughing like running with it, because, you know, I was happily paying them to tell me things and then not holding them to account to getting results or any of those things. You know, and it wasn't until that conversation that I really started to take charge and actually think, do you know what? He's right. If I don't sort this out now, my 6 kids are going to inherit this toxic patterns with money. Like, it has to stop with me, not only my kids, but my siblings. You know, I'm very close to my brother and sister. And, you know, both of them have lived with me over the years for that reason, because I needed to put them in environments where they could thrive, and they have. They've both like turned it around for themselves. And this is actually a picture of me with my kids. I just hosted a retreat in California in September, 6 months pregnant with baby number 6, because that is part of the legacy for me. You know, where my mum was saying like, why would you take your kids abroad? Why would you take them on holiday? Like, such a waste of money. Like, save it for yourselves. Like, you know, because she wasn't used to any, it's just a different mindset and a different time, isn't it? But now I'm like, no, if I'm going to do a luxury retreat in California, I'm taking my kids with me. And guess what? It's a business expense, because I get to normalize new levels of income for them too. Not so that they can be entitled little shitbags, but so that they can understand whatever path or success looks like for them, everything is possible. Nothing is off the table, because they don't, you know, even now, yes, I've, you know, transformed our relationship with wealth, but I'm not uber wealthy. I'm not, you know, we're not sitting in a £1,000,000 mansion. So there's another opportunity for them, isn't there, if that's what they desire. I'm in a different season right now. And because of this work that I've done, because I'm a manifesting generator with ADHD, I literally went down a rabbit hole, added 8 different modalities to my toolkit, turned this into my life's purpose. And now I support women to move from what felt like a struggle with 10K months. We now normalize that as our new level of success, and we can make it a 10K hour. Why the hell not? If somebody else is doing it, the law of oneness means that if one person can create it, we all can. And that is what's possible for you. So if you take nothing again away from this training, I want you to know that for yourself. And it's why I am now a trusted source, not only to, and because I'm an embodiment of abundance now, I'm happy to go into other women's businesses and ensure that they are creating wealth, because we all win when you do, and everybody else is lifted up around you. That needs to be your mantra. I'm going to get it put on a t-shirt. But to dive into some of this a little bit deeper, so trauma, obviously, as I've mentioned, it's just essentially an experience during childhood that will be impacting you now as an adult. And there are very obvious ways. The big T traumas, like I said, being homeless, not having a safe financial or home to go to, not having a stable basis as a child growing up. When you're venturing through the world and getting your sense of identity and sense of self, will obviously have impacted me. But actually, what the thing is, a lot of the time when you have those big T traumas, you don't even realize that they're trauma, because it's your normal. So you don't know that it was wrong or things were bad until you start to compare your experiences with others. It's always really funny. I follow a lady on TikTok, and she talks about being raised in the 80s and the 90s, and how unhinged that was, and how our kids like are mortified by the things that went on, but we didn't know. And actually it was fine. And it is fine until you realize, like, just the subtle ways that it is affecting you now as an adult. I was joking with my brother the other day about buying my mum slippers for Christmas because she used to throw them at us. And I was like, can you imagine? And obviously we think it's funny now because it didn't bother us. Like as kids, we just thought it was hilarious. And who could make her lose her shit quickest? You know, between us all siblings. Obviously now that sounds really abusive and toxic. But at the time it was fine, no big deal. So actually what affected me more was continually moving houses, continually moving schools, never having a friendship group. So therefore, I was always the new girl, never having friends, really affected my relationships with women specifically as I've been older. It's why I have a very small friendship group now, because I had a big friendship group for most of my 20s and 30s, women that are godmothers to my children, but they were not women that were of my highest good. They were women, again, that were profiting from my trauma, who I was over giving to, that were judging me, that were silently like hating me in some ways. That until I did this work, I couldn't see it for what it is. I thought it was safety in numbers. I thought I needed lots of people around me, and I don't, because now what I believe being a wealthy woman is having an intentional group of friends around me, which I do. So I'm going to take you through some of the developmental milestones. And again, if it doesn't resonate with it, it's fine. If it does, take a note of it, reflect on it later, dive deeper at your own kind of leisure. Because each one will be showing up for you very tangibly. So between the ages of 0 to 2, infancy, this is where we learn about trust and safety. This is where our developmental focus is very much on bonding with our parents, with our siblings. It's around nervous system regulation. It's, you know, for me, I co-sleep, I breastfeed, I do all of these things to regulate my baby's nervous system, to regulate her temperature, you know, all of these things. And it's about building basic trust. If you experience any kind of trauma at that time, and you might not necessarily know, you obviously won't be consciously aware of this, but if you have impacted that, so think back to what your parents would have been going through at that time, typically in the 80s or the 70s, you know, or 90s, 60s, what was happening for them at that time, your mother in particular, because if you experienced any kind of chaos or you know, trauma essentially is so encompassing, then you will have a difficulty in feeling safe in relationships now. You will struggle with your own emotional regulation because it wouldn't have been modeled for you at that age. You will have a subconscious fear of being abandoned, and maybe not being held. Even the fact that I have 6 kids, I have to be so intentional as somebody who is holding energy and space for such a lot of little people, that they all have their time and space with me. So for my mum, obviously at that age, it was only me and my sister, but you know, my dad was moving around. We were in the Navy. The chances are that would have been impacting her. She would have been distracted, emotionally unavailable. She wouldn't have been able to sit and hold a baby as a second person coming in like she would have done for my older sister. And then obviously how this will be mirrored back to you in your money realities, that you'll have that inherent fear of instability, discomfort receiving support. So again, maybe keeping your business small, not investing in social media managers or people that know more than you do because you're not used to being held or having that support. 3 to 6. This is our early childhood. It's why, you know, school can be such a make or break time for a child's self-esteem. It's where you start to build up your own authority in your autonomy, in your decision making, but also in your identity. It's when kids suddenly understand very quickly where they are in the pecking order of things, of life. Even now, my son is dyslexic. He is learned very quickly. I remember in his first like couple of weeks of reception, the teacher coming out. Now he's the youngest in the year. He also has additional needs. And the first thing they let me know was he's behind. You need to get him up to speed because he's learning for himself very quickly that he is not as clever as everybody else. And I mean, there's so many factors that will be affecting this, but he was in a year where there was a lot of girls born. So therefore, girls are inherently very good at things that boys aren't. And because he's in a class full of girls, again, he's realizing very quickly, I'm not academic. And that is forming his identity. That is forming his self-worth and where he fits in with things. So therefore, what his potential is, what his capability is. And, you know, this is where boys can kind of go one way or another. I could talk about him all day. He's also psychic, by the way. So it's really interesting. Like, he's very in tune to energies and things. I have to very intentionally put him in environments where he can succeed, where he will be safe to be seen and to share his gifts and to be thoughtfully received, like his friendship circles and things, to make sure that he can thrive as a parent. But do I think that my mum was doing that in the 80s? No, she was still smoking in the car with me in the back, like getting like fag ash in my eyes. We were lucky if we had seatbelts. It was a different time. There was nobody safeguarding, me in that way. But also this was a time where my dad passed. So I felt that heavy energy, that trauma, not only in our home, but in our family. And equally, she was completely emotionally avoidant after that point. So this is where, our developmental focus is on learning independence, having self-expression, learning boundaries. Again, if we went into a classroom where everything was about being a good girl, well done, because you know how to do this versus someone else. Well done, because you can do it by yourself. What is that teaching you as a woman? That you get validated for doing things alone, for doing more than others. And if you did experience trauma, you can get that shame around being seen, making mistakes, putting your hand up and getting it wrong, not being liked. Kids are fucking mean. And we're all kind of still operating from our traumatized 7-year-old selves. You can have lack of confidence in expressing your needs, in being fully seen. You can have codependent, people-pleasing tendencies. And this will be showing up in your money game around fear of charging your worth and setting boundaries with clients, over giving, because we'd rather be liked than be wealthy. 7 to 12, this is around like the middle stages of childhood, where we are again learning that competence and comparison. It's where like mean girls are real. High school, it's why I homeschool my 2 teenage girls, for that reason, because I am not going to let mean girls impact their potential in this world. I'm not going to let, it's such a pivotal point in building your self-esteem and your competence, that again, I'm protecting that for my kids. But even if you can't, you as the mum, as the woman in that dynamic, have a really incredible opportunity to model behavior for your kids, what is safe. So kind of on a tangent here, but if you are the kind of woman who stands in front of the mirror, constantly pulling yourself apart, saying, but still pouring into your kids, saying, you're amazing, you can be what you want, you can have what you want, everything you're telling your kids will be falling on deaf ears, because you are their tribal elder. And ultimately, we are all still looking for our tribal elders at a very subconscious level. It's why people will invest in you or they won't. It's why your conviction sells or it doesn't. If you don't believe that you are the shit, and that clients investing money with you are safe to do so because you know your stuff, and you're an embodiment of that, unconsciously they'll lean out. They'll be like, she doesn't seem quite sure. So I'm going to go over here where this person, this narcissistic person who believes like they are the best thing and all the things, I'm going to invest with that person because they seem a lot surer and that feels a lot safer. So reverse engineer that to your kids. You are their tribal elder. You are their Beyonce, their North Star. If you are not living your life to the fullest expression, if you are not happy, if you are not healed, they won't be either. Because they are, if you can't do it, you are their Jesus, their center of all things, and you can't do it, then that is more powerful evidence than anything that you say to them as to what is available to them. So I hold myself to a really high regard. Anytime I get into martyr mode, or I, allow old conditioning to kind of lean in, kind of run the show for a little bit of period of time, even when I'm really fucking busy and there's loads of shit, I know it's easier for me to do it. Of course it is, because I'm very quick and, used to multitasking and all the things. But, or be allowing, emotions to overwhelm me. My kids don't need to see their mum losing their shit and being trodden on by every person around them. They need to see their mum being a leader, being empowered, being happy, being more than just one thing. I always bring myself back to that. It's not even about me, it's about them. So And even if you have kids or you don't have kids, it's everybody else, like I say, that gets lifted up when you do this work too. So between the ages of 7 to 12, so even if you can't do it for yourself, do it for them. This is where you learn mastery, where you start to learn what you're good at and what you're not, where you have that interaction with your peers, where you start to build up your own cup and self-esteem. If you've experienced trauma at that age, judgment, abandonment, rejection, all of those things, you might have a belief that your worth is tied to performance. It's where we end up overworking when we need to. It's where corporate jobs are very good at validating us, because they reward us for that busyness, and that that chronically over busy and taken on too much. It's where we don't feel good enough and we have to prove ourselves. We might feel overly sensitive to rejection or failure. It's where any knockback in business becomes personal. It's where we take ourselves out the game depending on our energy in our business, what's going on in our personal lives, if our partner's a dick or not. We allow everything else to control us, and to trigger us, and therefore our reality and our potential. This looks like overwork, burnout, fear of failure, tying income to self-worth. 13 to 18, this is where we get our sense of belonging and identity. It's where we start to get, our purchases, we might get guilt or shame around our desires. It's where if you want to go and buy an outfit and your mum's like, you're not wearing that, even things like that could be impacting you. If you recognize for yourself that you're a little bit different to your peers around you, you might end up retreating from that and masking and trying to be what everybody else wants you to be rather than what you actually want to be. This is where human design is so powerful, because it shows you who you are at your very core, who you are meant to be in this lifetime, before everybody else got hold of you and told you who they wanted you to be. So again, could be where you have difficulty knowing even what that looks like. For a long time, I felt very disconnected to myself, because during this time, I didn't have any sense of self-expression or freedom. I couldn't even have a tantrum or, explore or fail or try a few things, because I was just trying to get my bills paid and be liked enough to not be moved on to the next family member. So I didn't know who I was for a really long time. And then when you become a mum, like, it changes again, doesn't it? So this is where you could be showing up online, not as the most authentic version of you, just as what you think you're meant to say and talk about and look like online. It's where we give our power away to every other person around us as to what will build success in business. Even though, again, as women, we already know money making is an exchange of value. That's all it fucking is. We've been doing this since the dawn of time, when we were trading camels. And yet the masculine energies around us will tell us you can only make money in one way. I didn't even have social media for 6 months. I knew how to show up and share value and make invitations. So be a helpful person and therefore be compensated in exchange. I did all of that without a social media presence. You can do this too, but equally you can also have a social media presence, but do it your way, not somebody else's. This is where we undercharge, because we're looking at what everybody else is telling us is socially acceptable to charge. It's where I love to work with creatives and healers, because typically their industry is telling them you're a bad person if you want to charge a sustainable wage for your business, and you're not trusting your own inner voice. And yet that is your superpower, ladies. Our feminine, divine feminine creative power is what allows us to really stand out online, because it enables us to lean into our intuition, assess trends, to change and tap into what people inherently need. We're bypassing all of that by learning about funnels and all of the things. Yes, we need both in business, but you can still do it your way. And equally, obviously, pre-birth. So as I said earlier about epigenetics, things are passed down. So again, think of like your grandparents. They went through depressions, wars, recessions. Then that was passed down to your mum, who was then operating from that was then passed down to you. You can see how a lot of your limiting beliefs might not even belong to you. And bearing that in mind, without kind of overwhelming you, this is where the subconscious programming comes in. So it will be your experiences of trauma, your first world, real world experiences of what you've gone throughout your childhood, that will be making you more risk averse and not wanting to do hard things that might trigger something else happening. But it will also be your conditioning. So this is where your money mindset really comes in. So your brain is obviously made up of 3 parts. Again, I'm going to kind of very top level this, because we know through neuroplasticity, that we can change our mind actually. And for me, this isn't the main thing that you need to work on when it comes to transforming your relationship with money, because actually, as I said, we're living in more and more exciting times as women. We're starting to see for ourselves that the evidence is possible, that what we want is safe for us to receive. And we know through neuroplasticity that we can change our mind, our whole personality, our rewire all of our belief systems actually more easier than we ever thought. Once we have awareness, once we have the desire, but it's the regulation and the embodiment stuff that's missing for me. So, but I will obviously touch on this. So your brain is made up of three parts. As you can see, your conscious thought is only 5% of that. So you might have a conscious desire right now that you want to make six figures in your business, that you want to be the game changer for your family, that you want it to be easy. But if you've got an unconscious belief that rich people are greedy, that you're going to have to sacrifice time with your kids, that it's, you're going to leave family members behind, or that you're going to end up paying more taxes, or that people aren't ultimately buying now anyway because you're susceptible to what the mainstream media has programmed you with, then you're going to be undermining that desire all of the time. You are going to make it harder. Your brain is going to look for evidence that actually people aren't buying, cost of living crisis. Well, that might be true in the UK right now. I'm not going to negate that, because Jesus, my food shopping bill, oh my Lord, is insane. Can you imagine, for 6 kids, in 2 of them in nappies? It is insane. So the evidence is there. I'm not going to say that it doesn't exist, but what I know is that as an entrepreneur and as a woman, the UK economy doesn't set my my financial reality. I can work with women in any part of the world. I can work with any class of women. The wealthy aren't worried about Asda adding an extra 10p to bloody tomatoes. We're an Italian household, bloody hell, the amount of tin tomatoes I go through, I have witnessed that increase of tin tomatoes. It annoys the hell out of me when I used to get them for like 25p and now they're 45. That's the reality. I don't need to worry about that, because my clients don't need to worry about that, because we are tapping into a global economy as women, through the medium of Instagram, and it's entirely free. There's so many things at our disposal right now that we don't need to worry about those things. But where did those beliefs come from? Well, as I've said, most things, 99% of our programming is coming from our desire to be safe, our tribal programming that is still running the show from the dawn of time, because ultimately our brain just wants to keep us safe. It wants to ensure the survival of the species. It doesn't care if we're happy, if we're living our best lives, if we're YOLOing it up, or if we are fulfilled. It just wants to know that we can get up again tomorrow and be healthy. So it's applied very literal logic to the meaning of, for us to be safe, we need to be liked by our tribe. And I've studied child development and psychology, and it's interesting how manipulative babies are in order to be safe as soon as they come into this world. Think of them like an Apple iPhone, that hasn't downloaded from the cloud yet, that has no programming whatsoever. That is us when we come into this world as a brand new being. We have to look to everybody else around us to tell us how things are done around here, because we want them to like us and accept us, to keep us safe, to keep us fed and watered and all of the things. So therefore, that our brain is in a hyper learning state. We're like sponges before the ages of 7. We need to understand what we are seeing, what we are observing, what we are feeling, so that we can get a sense of like how things are done around here, to be liked and accepted by our tribe. So it's great as a parent, when you want to talk about like Father Christmas and Santa, and you haven't got a 3-year-old saying, but how does that work, like the logistics when we don't have a chimney. It's great that kids are just accepting all of this because they trust us as their leaders to have their highest interests at heart, which is great, because I do believe, and I have to believe, that our parents were doing the best that they could with what they had available to them at the time, the lens that they had and the resources and the mindset and the culture at the time. But that isn't the case for all of us, is it? And they weren't evolved, expanded beings. So if we learn that don't pay taxes and all of the things, the rich get rich while the poor get poor, money doesn't grow on trees, like how many times did you hear that? But equally on the flip side, there's starving kids in Africa. Be humble, be grateful, don't want too much, you're spoiled, you're entitled. Like all of these things. Think back to the films that you watched when you were younger. I said before about Melanie Griffith's Working Girl. I'm a big reader. It's why I wrote a book. Uh, all of the times the villains are the wealthy people. Think about all of that made up and underpin your beliefs about money from a young age. It's no surprise that part of you wants to be successful, but there's a very real part that doesn't. A part that doesn't want to be rejected by your peers, that doesn't want to experience negative consequences, again, like you did from being judged, abandoned, rejected when you were younger. So when you start to bring awareness to these beliefs, because what will have happened is that you've instilled the beliefs. Maybe it was your parents were arguing about money when you were younger, very literal brain with no emotional maturity or critical faculty function, applied the logic. As I said, it's about what we felt, what we saw, what we heard. Oh, there's tension in this room. My parents are arguing about money, therefore money equals bad. If you experienced that and felt that, and that belief was implanted, then we have a negativity bias. We have a confirmation bias in our minds also, where we want to always see the negative possible outcomes of any situation because we want to stay safe, which is, our superpower as women. So we don't go down dark alleys. We don't get chased by saber-toothed tigers when we go off to Tesco's. But it means that we will always be looking for confirmation that those beliefs are correct. So we need to start to unlearn the beliefs that aren't actually serving us. So if you bring awareness to it, that is the first step. Then the last part of this puzzle is around safety, what we feel safe to receive. So again, it kind of feeds onto the other two, but money is masculine energy. Money represents our father figure and what we were, the safety that we received as a child growing up. Feminine energy is about your worth. So this will be embodied through our maternal role models, and relationships with both parents have a role to play in it. So the father wound, there's a lot of information here, but essentially daddy issues are real. If you had a relationship with your dad, maybe he was unavailable for whatever reason. If he was absent, mine was obviously absent, and I never had a safe father presence in my life after that. Or maybe he was critical, didn't give you validation, he was emotionally distant, put pressure on you to achieve. You didn't feel safe with him, or you didn't have somebody there in whatever and bear in mind, you're looking at it a lens from a 7-year-old child who hasn't got the emotional context. Think, well, my dad wasn't here because he was working all the time, because he was trying to keep our family safe. It's just he wasn't here, so therefore he didn't love us, or something along those lines. There will be core themes that come up around feeling unworthy, not feeling seen, putting pressure on ourselves to over deliver, fear of failure or rejection, and this will absolutely be impacting our relationship and what we feel safe to receive now, not only in money, in our relationships, in our partners, in our friendships, in visibility. And this is around really finding safety in yourself. This is how you heal the father wound, because we can't change the past. And you probably won't even get that now, even if your dad is still around. People can't give you what you need. You need to get it for yourself, even if they're apologetic, even if they didn't know. So this is about reclaiming your own inner authority and self-trust. It's about letting go of the need for external approval to feel worthy and creating a new relationship with power, structure, and success. Now, on the flip side of that, with the mother wound comes from unmet needs. Emotional disconnection, criticism, overprotection from your primary nurturer, because that's what we're meant to do as women. We aren't meant to be doing all of the things. We are meant to be nurturing our children and ensuring that they feel safe to receive, giving them emotional support, allowing them to thrive. But again, we come from different times. You might have experienced guilt or shame. I have a lot of, the mother wound is real for a lot of women, particularly if they had a mum that had big dreams and ambitions and who wasn't living in a time where she could fulfill it, that potential. Maybe there was a bit of resentment there. Maybe there were mums that were very unhappy and really fucking pissed off all the time, that were overly critical or judgmental, that weren't nurturing or emotionally available because they were dealing with their own stuff. So this, again, you can't change the past, but what you can do, or maybe they were to the point of overgiving, where they were pouring into you and just complete martyrs for themselves. And so therefore, when you want more for yourself, you're met with the guilt, the mum guilt. This is where learning to nurture yourself emotionally is really important, releasing that guilt around receiving and thriving, and rewriting the belief that love and sacrifice are the same, because they're not. So I hope that's given you a lot to think about. So what your next steps are from here in order to integrate everything that we've talked about today, I believe it's for you to take some ownership, do a bit more of a deep dive into your mindset and your beliefs about money. Hopefully you can see it's not just your financial reality that is suffering right now by you being the wounded woman potentially that you could be. And that when you start to do this work, the ripple effect of it is absolutely huge into all areas of your business, of your life, in your relationships, in your happiness, in your health. Because bear in mind, all of that trauma right now is stuck in your body, murkying the waters and making things feel very heavy. The biggest thing for me, I felt when I did this work, was that I felt stronger, healthier, happier, like better friendships. And it just becomes the gift that keeps on giving because success compounds. Um, and the ripple effect of this is absolutely huge, which is why will never stop talking about it. It's to start to look at those traumas, identifying where they are, maybe where they came from, so that you can start to remove those blocks for success for yourself. Start to embody the version of you that has everything you want now. So start to identify the gaps when you think about what it means to be wealthy and where you are right now, how you are operating, being, showing up, what you are allowing, what you are permitting, how you are speaking, with what conviction you're selling. Like, where are the gaps? Where is the bridge that you need to cross from where you are to where you want to be? What does she look like? How does she show up? You know, and start to take symbolic steps towards that, which I'll be supporting you with throughout the rest of this week, with just some symbolic gestures that you can take, and then commit to this as a daily practice, because it's sacred and everyone wins when you do. And whenever you are unsure of where am I getting stuck, it's like, what part of you wants it when you think about your next level goals, and what part of you doesn't? And it will typically just write that down in a journal. What part of me doesn't want this right now? When things are going wrong, when your launches aren't going well, when sales are not coming, what part of you doesn't want it? Where is the energetic unconscious resistance coming in for you? Where do you have one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake? Because I guarantee there will be something. Because if you were in a full body, mind, body, soul alignment with what you want, it would already be coming to you. So maybe it's the part of you, I get this still even now, the part of me that feels like being a mum is to be here and be present every minute of the day and protecting my kids, because nobody was there to do that for me. The reality is my kids aren't in a, abusive environment, so I don't need to keep them safe, other than from things like YouTube and social media, and we've already got that locked down. So I have to remind myself and do this work when things aren't working. What part of me is it that actually doesn't want it to work? And it will be things like that. It gives you powerful feedback. So finally, I just want to leave you with two invitations before I go into the Q&A. If you recognize for yourself, I want to actually start to get to the bottom of this, because what's got me here is not going to get me where I want to go. I have two invitations. They are not high ticket. I am not here to get women into like hugely expensive programs that they are not financially regulated to invest at that level, so that you can then be under even more pressure and stress. So I have my first generation academy. Neither is better or worse. It is just about you being in discernment with what you need in this next season. It's a 12-month program. We do all of this work and more, but it's very much more self-led. That's why the price point is more accessible. It's 222 per month. We do business coaching. I'll help you to align your strategy with your human design. There's lots of resources to do the healing work. There's like multiple programs essentially that you go through to essentially ensure that after that 12 months, you are the wealthiest version of you. And then there is also the Wealthy Woman Accelerate. So if you're like, girl, I do not have 12 months, I want to get to this now, then I have the 6-month mini minds, which is the Wealthy Woman Accelerator that's starting in January. And one thing I'm really excited about is that I have, again, I've got a physical premises that I'm going to be taking keys for shortly. I believe about being in the room. So it's great to do things virtually and offline and all of that. But it's why I have an events business, is because I know the compounds and the spiritual amplification that happens when you get people together. So I am starting in January with women that want to essentially like, let's go. So there's 6 different months. Every month has a theme that will literally stabilize your finances at a mindset level, absolutely do that healing work. But then it's also about the cash flow and the wealth building. Like, where else are we going to learn this information, so that we can sort out your monthly recurring revenue, so that we can get your bills paid till next year, so that you can start to make strategic decisions in your business and start to scale and invest in teams, not from a wing and a prayer and I hope it works out, from a I already know because I've got I've got enough recurring revenue to cover these bills for the next 12 months. It's about aligning your sales and strategy to your human design, sorting out your offer suite. I'm obviously known as the queen of leverage. I'm not doing all the things, but one thing I have learned really well is about having offer suites and pricing strategies that mean that I can keep people in my world for longer, so that I can have recurring revenue every month, so that I don't leave money on the table. That's what we'll be doing for your business. And then obviously once you've done all of that and your system is regulated and you are used to receiving and at more and higher quantities, then we can start to use that brand in your business as a next level, like brand. This is where you can start to write books, be seen on stages, and actually paying it forwards. So there's two options. You can do it virtually if you don't live anywhere near me. I'm in Surrey. That's obviously at a reduced investment, or if you would prefer to be in the room and you're happy to travel, then it's obviously slightly more. You can come in my offices and we will make it a whole vibe and a whole thing. And when you join this week, then obviously you can come and join us for our Christmas dinner, but that's the same for both options. So I am just going to stop the share now and stop the recording for the women that are watching back on the replay, so that we can keep it nice and succinct. Stop recording.